Welcome to Corvette Today, the show that talks about everything Corvette, with your host, Steve Garrett, lifetime member of the National Corvette Museum, president of the Corvette Club of Kansas City, Missouri, and radio disc jockey at the #1 radio station in Kansas City for over 45 years. Here's Steve Garrett.
Thanks for listening and watching Corvette Today, the show that talks about everything Corvette, and the only current podcast dedicated to Corvette. I'm your host, Steve Garrett. I appreciate you tuning in. Corvette Today is brought to you by Wheelcraft. Want to dress up your Corvette with bright chrome or black chrome wheels? Visit wheelcraft.com and learn about their advanced PVD chrome finishing. They can refinish your wheels or offer a wheel exchange for most models, and it comes with a 5-year warranty. Visit wheelcraft.com today or call them at 833-840-5334. You can listen to Corvette Today on all podcast platforms. You can also listen on your smart device. Just say, "Hey Google," or "Alexa, play the podcast called Corvette Today," and you're connected. And be sure to visit the Corvette Today website. It's CorvetteToday.com. You can access everything there, including the Corvette Today merchandise store. You can also join our Corvette Today Facebook group there as well. Also, make sure you sign up for the Corvette Today emails, notifications, and updates at CorvetteToday.ck.page. And be sure to subscribe to our Corvette Today YouTube channel. See all Corvette Today episodes on YouTube as well. And be sure to patronize our flagship sponsors of Corvette Today, MidEngineCorvetteForum.com, the forum that focuses on the new mid-engine C8 Corvette. Meet a lot of fellow Corvette enthusiasts like yourself at MidEngineCorvetteForum.com. Soul Performance Products, developed and manufactured in the United States, the Soul Performance Products exhaust portfolio has been tailored to elevate the experience of the world's most exciting sports cars, including the latest generation of the Corvette. Soul Performance Products at SOULPP.com, the official performance exhaust of Corvette Today. Aerolarri Wheels, a true forged wheel with over 20 unique styles to choose from for your C8 and wide-body versions of the C7, C6, and C5 Corvette. It's an amazing value, starting at only $23.88 for a set of 4 fully forged wheels. And use the promo code CT111 and get $100 off your purchase. Visit Aerolarri.com. Ciocca Corvettes. If you're a Corvette enthusiast, and I know you are since you're listening and watching Corvette Today, then you need to know about Ciocca Corvette. They're based in Atlantic City, where you can find over 100 new and pre-owned vets on the lot and inbound. Ciocca also ships Corvettes all over the country, custom ordered to your specifications. They're staffed with experienced pros who can answer all your questions. So don't compromise. Visit CioccaCorvette.com. That's CIOCCA Corvette.com and find out more. Chevrolet. Together, let's drive. E5 Wheels. E5 Wheels is a passionate and dedicated wheel company that serves only Corvette. They make spun-forged wheels for your C8, C7, and C6 Corvette. With the best fitment in the industry, E5 Wheels ensures your wheels complement the aesthetics and functionality while optimizing the performance of your Corvette. Visit e5wheels.com or call them at 305-964-7429. C8 owners, tired of pesky water spots on your engine bay after a wash? So is Amora, the C8 Corvette lady. That's why she created C8 Dry Bay Vent Blocks. These American-made blocks are designed to keep your engine bay dry while you wash your C8. You get 7 blocks, enough to cover all 6 vent wells on your coupe and the rear window strip. Stop scrubbing those spots and get yours with free shipping at c8blocks.com. Veterans and first responders enjoy a $15 discount. Also available at Paragon Performance and West Coast Corvette. Call 317-457-0594 or go to c8blocks.com. And a shout out to Corvette Forum, welcoming Corvette enthusiasts from around the world. My guest on today's show is the 4th Chief Engineer of Corvette. He was also a race car driver, competing in IMSA in the late 70s and 80s. He also competed in the 24 Hours of Daytona and the 12 Hours of Sebring. He was inducted into the Corvette Hall of Fame in 2018, and his name is Tom Wallace. Tom, welcome to Corvette Today.
Well, thank you, Steve. Looking forward to it. This is going to be fun. I enjoy doing these. It was so great to meet you and for you to ask me on the show, so thank you.
I am so excited to have you on, buddy. Before we start our show, I always like to get to know you as a person a little bit better. Tell me where you grew up. Did you come from a car family?
Well, interestingly, I grew up in the Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania area, And I did not come from a car family of all things. My parents were hard workers. They were in retail. So I had to teach myself about cars. Plus, honestly, my grandfather helped me too. He taught me how to change rear brake drums and swear. The little spring would always go flying across the garage.
Yep.
And he got me interested in cars, and it just took off from there.
That's awesome. I remember those days too, buddy, by the way.
You bet.
All right. Now, tell me then, when did you realize you were a car guy? And give me your first recollection when you saw your first Corvette.
Well, it's interesting. The first time I remember about cars was, in fact, my grandmother told me about it. My mom and dad worked, so I stayed with my grandmother during the week. And I had all these little Hot Wheel cars and trucks. And my grandmother said, that's the only thing you'll play with. And if I take any of those away, you start to cry. You won't play games. You won't do this. So I guess it was when I was 2 or 3 that I got the itch with cars and trucks and just loved it. And I distinctly remember, now I was a little older then, that one of my favorite Hot Wheels was a Corvette.
Nice.
I mean, I didn't say to myself, I got to have one of those, but I'm sure I was thinking it. But that's how I got hooked on cars, was Hot Wheels when I was 2 or 3. And then from there, working on cars and having friends with cars. And I knew that's what I was set out to do.
Now, tell me about your first recollection of Corvette then, too.
I was probably, I'm going to say 12 or 13. And of course, I had my Hot Wheel collection, but I had gone beyond that. Now I had a hot bike that was really fast. Now, I don't mean a motorcycle. I mean a pedal bike. There was a fellow in our little subdivision that he had a Corvette. I hadn't met him yet, and I know when he would come down the street, I would try to race him with my bike. And he would beat me every time, of course. and finally, I got to meet him, and I said, hey, will you take me for a ride in your car? Oh, yeah, come on. And he took me for a ride. And I don't know, I guess I'd say I was hooked for hot rod sports cars at that moment. The Corvette is the one that got me hooked.
Absolutely. Now, you're a self-taught mechanic. How did you do that?
Well, there was no YouTube back then.
Right.
So I just started to work on cars. I would help people with the cars in the neighborhood. Actually, I started out detailing cars. But I learned from that, we couldn't afford new cars, and my dad didn't understand any of that. So I ended up being the one to work on it. Started with the simple oil changes, oil and filter changes, learning how to do that. Then the next thing you know was doing brake jobs and then rebuilding carburetors. And it was really sort of self-taught, but I had some good friends when I got to high school that were hot rods too. And I really learned the nuts and bolts with a 55 Chevy that we bought when I was only 14, didn't even have my license. And we put it in the garage, and I start tearing it apart. Brought it home, put it in the garage. Nice car, had been all restored, but it just had like a 327 two-barrel in it. About a month after we got it, my dad come home, and the engine's all apart on the floor.
Oh, boy.
He says, what the heck are you doing? We bought you a perfectly good car. And I said, well, I don't have my license yet. I might as well fix this thing up before I get my license. Of course, I rebuilt a couple of engines and blew them up and learned how to use plastic gauge for the bearing clearances and just sort of self-taught, with other friends.
That's amazing, buddy. Huh. Great story. Now, you've got a mechanical engineering degree from Kettering University. Tell me about your educational career and how you got into General Motors and also the GM Institute.
Well, it was interesting. Again, I was in high school, and I had a good friend whose brother was going to General Motors Institute. This friend of mine, he said, hey, he knew I was interested in mechanical and automotive, and the high school counselor at the time did not know about General Motors Institute. So I'm talking to the counselor and saying, look, I know I want to be an automotive. I want to be a mechanical engineer or an electrical, but at the time I was pretty sure it was mechanical. This friend of mine said, you need to talk to my brother. So he came home on one of his downtimes, and I talked with him, and he described it, and I said, oh my gracious, that's exactly what I want to do. Now, General Motors is now Kettering University, but it was owned by General Motors, and it had mechanical, electrical, industrial, and a little bit of business degrees, but you had to apply, and it was a co-op program where you had to work at a General Motors plant as well as go to school. When you worked at that time, it was 6 weeks you worked. And then at the end of 6 weeks, everybody swapped, and I went to then school, and the ones at school came out and worked at the plants. But you had to be accepted at both an engineering work facility as well as the institute. So getting into the institute was an easy part for me with the grades. I really had good grades, and I wanted to get in and all that. But the hard part was you also had to be hired by a General Motors facility. Now, I could have worked in Pittsburgh, but the only thing they had was a sheet metal stamping plant. And I went down down and looked it over, and I said, man, I don't know. This is pretty narrow. I want to be in engines and transmissions and all that. So I said, well, I'll try getting into Chevrolet in Detroit area, into the engineering facility. Well, I was too late. I couldn't get in there. So my second choice was Buick Engineering. And lo and behold, somehow I got lucky enough to get into Buick Engineering. They accepted me. And with the school acceptance and being accepted at Buick Engineering, I was able to start in the summer of 1966 was when I started.
Very nice.
At GMI.
That's awesome. It really proved out to turn out well for you, because while you were at GM, before you got on Corvette, you worked on some iconic cars like the Grand National and the GNX.
Yeah, I'll tell you, General Motors Institute experience was just fantastic. Why? Well, the first work tour I had at Buick in Flint, at that time, there was a full array of everything. There was a foundry, a forge, a sheet metal plant, an assembly plant, an engine plant, etc. My first work session was 6 weeks in the foundry in the summer at 85-degree temperature. At that time, it convinced me, you better study, because this is not what you want to do. It's work in the foundry. It was just an outstanding opportunity at General Motors, at the Institute, and working at Buick. I was able to rotate it's a 5-year program through all the different areas. Finally, I graduated, got right into engineering, and worked in the engine group. Eventually, I was able to work at Buick and Chevrolet. And like you said, started with the turbo V6 engines, and then that led into the Buick Grand Nationals, and then the GNXs, and then eventually other vehicles, sport utilities at Chevrolet, and then eventually into Corvette.
That's nice. Well, buddy, let's take our first break. And when we come back, we're going to talk more about your time at General Motors. That's coming up next here on Corvette Today.
Wheelcraft's PVD chrome finish in bright chrome or black chrome is the buzz of the Corvette community. But now, Wheelcraft is proud to announce they can now do custom finishes for your OEM wheels, including the bronze wheel color option. And you still get the Wheelcraft 5-year warranty on all wheels. Wheelcraft offers factory wheel exchanges for C4 through C8 Corvettes, or they can apply the PVD chrome finish to your current wheels. Buying a new Corvette? Wheelcraft will work with your Chevrolet dealership to get your PVD chrome wheels there on time. You can drive away with your new wheels already installed. Doing an R8C delivery at the National Corvette Museum? Wheelcraft has partnered with the NCM Motorsports Park to do wheel exchanges once your R8C delivery is completed. You'll drive home from the NCM with your new Wheelcraft wheels. Plus, you still get free lifetime access to the Wheelcraft pit crew. So visit wheelcraft.com or call them at 833-639-4231. Arrive in style with Wheelcraft.
The National Corvette Restorer Society is a proud sponsor of Corvette Today. Are you already an NCRS member? If not, you should consider joining, and here's why. The NCRS means community. We're a community of individuals who love the Corvette hobby and enjoy the fellowship that NCRS provides. We have NCRS chapters throughout the U.S. and Canada where members can meet monthly and share in the enjoyment of the Corvette with like-minded people. NCRS means excellence. NCRS trains some of the best and most educated judges and informed owners in the car collector world. NCRS means inclusion. Owners of both classic and new Corvettes are welcome. We offer flight and concourse judging for 53 through 07 model years and sportsman awards for Corvettes ranging from 53 through 2025. NCRS means leadership. With over 10,000 members, NCRS researches, writes, publishes, and distributes tech manuals and judging guides for the 53 through 07 Corvettes. No other Corvette organization does this, and they're available for purchase. Members also receive the bi-monthly and award-winning Restore magazine and Driveline magazine throughout the year. We also host an extensive technical discussion board at ncrs.org. Finally, NCRS means value. Many of our prestigious awards can and often do increase the value of the cars that achieve our awards. Whether you own a 53 Corvette or the latest 25 model, the NCRS has a place for you. Check us out at ncrs.org.
Hi, I'm Mark Falter, host of the Retirement Income Hour podcast and Corvette enthusiast. I know when I bought my Z06, I was thinking two things. One, these cars are incredible. And two, man, are they expensive. Owning a Corvette isn't just about driving fast. It's about living life in the fast lane. But are your finances keeping up? On my podcast, I make wealth management as smooth as your car on the open road. Whether it's planning your retirement, building your investments, or how to get this retirement account to pay for your Corvette vision, I got you covered. Search for the Retirement Income Hour podcast wherever you get your podcasts, and let's shift your finances into overdrive. I'll see you on the open road, financially and literally.
Investment advisory services offered through Mid-American Wealth Advisory Group, an SEC-registered investment advisory firm.
Stretch the life of your Corvette's paint with Nova Stretch, the performance protective cover. From bugs to rock chips, Nova Stretch covers protect your Corvette, utilizing stretch fabric technology and an innovative fastening system for quick installation and easy removal and storage. Made in the USA for a tailored fit, the patented design and breathable mesh protects your Corvette without rubbing or chafing the paint like traditional covers. And unlike clear film or old-time car bras, Nova Stretch provides full front-end coverage including the grille, keeping radiators and heat exchangers clean and debris-free. Visit novastretch.com and use the code Corvette Today 15 to get 15% off your order. Protect your Corvette with Nova Stretch.
I'm Harlan Charles, and you're listening and watching Corvette Today with Steve Garrett.
Thanks for checking out Corvette Today on podcast and YouTube. It's the only current podcast dedicated to Corvette. Corvette Today is brought to you by Wheelcraft. Wheelcraft carries all the latest factory wheel designs for the C8 Stingray, Z06, and E-Ray, and popular wheel designs from previous generations as well. Along with bright chrome and black chrome, Wheelcraft now offers bronze and custom colors at half the cost of OEM. So visit wheelcraft.com today or just give them a call. 833-639-4231. I'm your host, Steve Garrett. With me is my buddy, Tom Wallace, the fourth Chief Engineer for Corvette. In segment number 2, we're going to talk more about his time at General Motors. Tom, one of your many GM accomplishments was working on the Turbo V6. Tell me that story and how it became a mass production item.
Well, listen, Steve, that is a great story. I had been working in the engine group for 4 or 5 years, getting out of General Motors Institute, and mostly on emissions. That was the time when the emissions were coming into vogue. I did a lot of work with the emissions areas and carburetors, et cetera, et cetera. We had a Boy Scout troop that we were sponsoring out of Buick Engineering, and one of their projects was to turbocharge a V6.
Huh.
Now, I didn't realize that they were doing this, but a colleague at work, Ken Baker, great friend, he had a Corvette that he raced. I was racing my Camaro by that time, so we had fun racing together. He was like the sponsor for the Boy Scout troop. And they were doing the Turbo V6, and it was pretty tough. It wasn't running very well and all that stuff. But they got Lloyd Royce's attention. Lloyd Royce, who is Mark Royce's father, he's since passed, but what a great guy Lloyd was, and so is Mark. But Lloyd was chief engineer of Buick, and he thought, when he saw the Boy Scout project, he said, I wonder if we could turbocharge the V6 in production. I think you can get the economy of a V6 and the power of a V8 with such a program. He kicked that around a little bit, and one day I got a call, and I was supposed to go to Lloyd's office. I mean, I was just an engineer at the time, and I'm thinking, what did I do? I'm about to be fired. You just don't get called into the chief engineer's office, you know. But my assistant chief engineer, Cliff Studeaker, he said, no, it's okay. You're going to be surprised. And I thought, yeah, surprised, walked out the door. But we went in and sat down, and Lloyd said, hi, Tom, how are you? You know, I've heard you've been doing good work on the emissions and all that stuff. And he says, I also heard you're a hot rod. And I said, well, yeah, I race on the side. And he says, listen, I would like to do a feasibility study to turbocharge the V6 and see if it might be something we could do in production and get the fuel economy of a V6 and the power of a V8. And I said, well, that sounds pretty cool. And he says, so I've just committed that we're going to pace the 1976 Indy 500, at the time it was a Century, with a turbo V6.
Wow.
And I said, well, that's pretty cool, Lloyd. And he says, and you're going to do it. That's where it's like, what? So I said, Lloyd, I don't know anything about turbocharger. And he says, I know, go pick 2 or 3 of the guys you need, spend 2 weeks feasibility and come back and tell me if you think we can make it work. So we had to go to the library. You know, there's no YouTube and internet. We had to go to the library to start learning about turbocharging. There had been some turbocharge projects done in General Motors. We talked to those people, et cetera, and we said, well, yeah, we think we can do it. It's not going to be easy. So we started to work on it, and we had till like January to where we had to take the car down to the Indianapolis track and see if it was any chance, because there's certain requirements to be an Indy Pace car. And one of them is to accelerate from 90 degrees in the middle of the short chute between turn 3 and turn 4. You got to be there at 90 and accelerate through turn 4 and exit at 120 and then be able to get into the pits out of the way.
Wow.
That was the requirement. I think it still is exactly that requirement. By the way, the other thing is you have to prove that you can stop the car by the start-finish line because of that accident a long time ago when a car couldn't stop and it went into the press crew down at the end of the pits. So, long story short, we started to do the development and had all kind of challenges. We were cracking cylinder heads. We were lighting the spark plug wires on fire. We couldn't keep oil pressure in the turns. The chassis wasn't good enough, so we got a chassis guy to help us. That's where all the racing really came in to help. All my racing experience was to be able to figure out the things we had to do. And lo and behold, we made it work. We paced the race, the 1976 Indy 500 with the Century V6 turbo. It was all successful. We didn't have any failures. Of course, we were working behind the scenes a lot. We had to put cylinder heads on about every other day. We could not keep the cylinder heads on it with the pressure we were running. A.J. Foyt got in the car, time trials week, went out, and he was having trouble with his car. We actually ran more boost in the turbo V6 than they were allowed to run in the race cars that year.
Wow.
He got in the car, took it for 3 or 4 laps, came in, turned to his crew chief and said, "Throw my car away, put a number on the side of this car. I'm racing this one."
Wow. That's amazing.
So we laughed about it, and it was a very successful pace car. And from that, we came back, and I thought, okay, that's great. We did what we're supposed to do, and here's Lloyd Rice called us in the office again. He says, "That was fantastic. You guys did great, et cetera, et cetera." Now he says, "This is so good. The publicity is so great. We're going to put it into production within a year if you can do it." And I said, "Wait a minute. That's a lot different, than a onesie pace car." And he says, "Yeah, I know, but you're going to have to expand your team." And the next thing you know, we were working on what became, it was a T-type in the beginning, is what we called it. But it was the Regal T-type model, which had the turbocharger in it. Then it became the Grand National. And then eventually the coup d'etat was when we did the low volume GNX at the end of the production run. So that's how it all came to be. Started out by a Boy Scout project sponsored by Buick Engineering.
Thank you, Boy Scouts of America.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
That's amazing. Now, tell me more about that 76 Indy 500 pace car. That had to be exciting. You worked on a lot of pace cars.
I did. I ended up working on 8 pace cars over my career. The craziest one was the Oldsmobile Bravada. You may remember that one. Where we were trying to build up the marketing for Oldsmobile, but worked on 8 total. The first one was turbocharged V6, which we did fantastic on. It was great to work with the Indianapolis people. I worked with them so much that I ended up driving a lot of times leading the festival cars, lead the race for the first couple laps.
Wow.
I did that 3 or 4 times because they knew I had my FIA license, and it was just a great relationship. I would say out of the 8 that I worked on, the ones that I remember the most are the 76 V6 Turbo, then the Oldsmobile Bravada, which was really hard to do. We had to do a lot of extra special things to get the thing to be able to handle and go from 90 to 120 in the turn 4 and all that stuff. But then the 2 that I probably had the most fun with were the 2007 and 2008 Corvettes that we did.
That's awesome. And all that led up to you becoming Chief Engineer for Corvette and Chief Line Engineer for Corvette as well.
Yes, and that's an interesting story because I had an opportunity about 10 years before I came chief. We were doing a major restructuring in General Motors. At that time, we put what we called vehicle line executives in charge of all the different car and truck lines with overall responsibility for that line, including profit and loss, not just engineering, but clear to profit and loss. I probably, if I had a push start, I could have got the Corvette at that time. But my boss said, "No, we need you in midsize truck. We got to do our new midsize utilities." And that's the 2001 Trailblazer, Envoy, Bravada, et cetera. But as that project was winding down, Bob Lutz was in place in General Motors by that time. And Bob knew that I raced. He and I used to talk about racing all the time when we weren't, so to speak, working. And Dave Hill was about to retire. And Dave was the 3rd Corvette chief engineer. I didn't know this, but Dave and Bob knew that Dave was going to retire. And Bob asked Dave, "Who do you think ought to take your place?" Dave said, "Well, I think it needs to be Tom Wallace. He's done this, he's done that, he's a racer, and we got the Z06 coming up, the ZR1 coming up, et cetera, et cetera. Next thing I know, Bob Lutz tapped me on the shoulder and he says, okay, Dave's going to retire. You're going to come over and become the 4th Corvette Chief Engineer.
That's amazing. What a great story, buddy. Congratulations on that.
Well, thanks. Listen, that was the job of a lifetime. I told Bob one time, I says, you don't need to pay me for this job. That's how great that job is.
Oh, I know, buddy.
It's just fantastic. And of course, I didn't really mean it, but it was just a fantastic job. And I got to thank Bob Lutz and Dave Hill for helping me get in that job.
Absolutely right. You're also, as we know now, a passionate race car driver. That passion rubbed off on the Corvette team too, because Corvette Validation was actually modified to incorporate some of your driving skills, which is awesome.
Yes, it was. In fact, when I got in there, it was a great team. By the way, the Corvette team is the best team in General Motors. And I know I'm biased and some people will argue with me, but I don't care. That's how I feel about it and felt about it. The interest in Corvette was so great, and we were starting to be more connected with Pratt Miller, that we knew that we had to have Corvettes that were validated, that they could go out and be put on the track with their owners with an oil change and new brake fluid, and boom, you can go and you can run on track. So we said, okay, we need to make sure that the vehicles are validated, and we instituted what we call the 24-hour test. And all the Corvettes, before they were ever released to production, have to have gone through 24 hours of high-speed driving on racetracks. A specific car you start with, and it has to go 24 hours with no failures other than tires and brakes and fuel. That's it. We put that into place, and that's still in place today. And that's why you can take a regular production Corvette, and once you break it in appropriately, you can take it to a track and it will work at the track. It'll cool itself. It won't overheat, and all the chassis control systems work. So we added that into, I'll call it the validation schedule. The other thing we did was, because we were getting more and more into high-speed driving on tracks, there already was, I'll call it a certification process, where if you were going to be in the Corvette group and drive Corvettes fast for any of this testing, you needed to pass a certain validation check that said you're capable. Because it's just not anybody that can jump in a Corvette and go 10/10 on a racetrack.
Right.
So that program was already in place, and we added to it, structured it a little bit different, so we had actually different levels. Example, like the floor mat engineer for a Corvette, they don't need to be able to drive 10/10 at Road America, okay?
Right.
But the chassis guys do, and the guys that do the engine work. So we had graduated increments of driving certification inside GM that you had to pass certain tests before you were allowed to jump in Corvette test cars and drive them aggressively wherever you were.
That's really cool. And I don't think a lot of people know this, but you are responsible for the high-performance driver's experience as well, weren't you?
Yes, that was an interesting story. When I got into the group, first couple staff meetings, and I'm asking, pretty big staff, and I'm asking the staff, all right, how many of you have driven a Corvette fast somewhere in a safe situation? And there weren't very many that had done that. And it was like, really? I'm surprised. Well, we've never had the opportunity. And, I don't own a Corvette. And whenever I go to the proving grounds, I'm not allowed to drive, et cetera, et cetera. So we hooked up with the Corvette Museum, because they were doing high performance driving events at various tracks, maybe 5 or 6 through the year. And a fellow by the name of Rock Linkoff was the spearhead of this. I talked to Rock and I said, hey, would you guys be receptive if I brought part of my staff down there and some of the prototypes and some production cars? I put members of my team through the little driving instruction. We always had driving instructors at these, or I say we, they did. And he said, you got to be kidding me. It will be great. So we started that, and it was a huge hit. Now, why was it a huge hit? First of all, the staff was able to get into a car, a safe, Hans device, helmet, the whole works, and be taught a little bit about what the cars were capable of doing and what they weren't capable of doing and what needed fixed. So the staff got exposure to that, which was really great. And the second thing that was an extra bonus was these driving events would have anywhere between 150 to 175 Corvette owners there.
Wow.
And suddenly they're saying, wait a minute, the Corvette chief engineer's here, the head of the structure is here, the head of the chassis is here, the finance guy on Corvette's here. And by the way, what's that camouflage prototype over there? The customers were going crazy about this. And suddenly, when they would schedule one of these, they would sell out like in 5 minutes,
Wow.
because the Corvette team's going to be here. So it was a win-win on all parts. We used it to not only build camaraderie with our Corvette customers, we learn from our customers. Our customers come tell us, hey, I run 2 laps and I run out of brakes. Really? Let us look at your car. So we look at the car and say, well, here's the problem. Plus, we'd learn about things that, hey, we're just not good enough in that area in the car to be able to do that. We got to improve that. So it was a win-win-win for everybody, and really, really loved doing it. And of course, for me, selfishly, I was in my element. Okay.
Definitely.
Here I am circulating racetracks at high speeds, burning General Motors fuel and tires and brakes. Okay. So it was like racing without having to pay the bill.
Gotta love it, buddy. Well, I tell you what, Tom, let's take our final break. When we come back, we're going to talk more about your time specifically with Corvette. That's coming up next here on Corvette Today.
Are you ready for a better insurance policy without the Corvette tax? With agreed value protection, the value of your collector vehicle will never change. Plus, you'll save money. Get a quick quote at ncminsurance.com.
Hey, Corvette lovers, this is Brian Sarr from IntelliSense Family Office. You've formerly known us as True Wealth and Company. First off, a huge congratulations to Steve Garrett on celebrating 6 amazing years of Corvette Today. We've been proud sponsors every mile of the way. You know the thrill and drive and the pride of ownership, but here's the big question. Do you have the same confidence in managing your wealth? At IntelliSense Family Office, we specialize in helping high net worth individuals like you protect, grow, and enjoy their wealth. Whether you're a successful entrepreneur, a professional athlete, or someone who's worked hard to achieve your financial goals, we've got you covered with personalized expert advice. We understand the unique challenges you face and the dreams you have for the future. From advanced tax planning to succession planning, we provide comprehensive services tailored to your needs. Our goal? To give you peace of mind so you can focus on what you love. Ready to take your financial management to the next level? Visit IntelliSense.com or reach out to us today at 913-653-8783. Let's drive your financial success together. I'm Brian Sarf, and I look forward to helping you live the dream. Save the wave and see you on the road. Investment advisory services offered through IntelliSense Investment Solutions Incorporated, an SEC registered investment advisor.
When you want to buy a Corvette, or any Chevrolet for that matter, get yours from Hendrick Chevrolet Shawnee Mission, located in Kansas City. Hendrick Chevrolet is the largest Corvette dealership and showroom in the Midwest. With a knowledgeable sales staff and Corvette sales specialists on hand, they'll help you build the Corvette of your dreams, and they ship nationwide. With Corvette certified master mechanics on site and a huge parts department with over 24,000 parts and $2 million in inventory, Hendrick Chevrolet is well equipped to take care of your every need. From sales to service to collision repair, Hendrick Chevrolet has you covered. Visit ChevyUSA.com or call 913-384-1550.
Rev up your ride with the ultimate upgrade. The Radiator Grill Store is your go-to destination for top-notch C8 Corvette Stingray, Z06, and E-Ray accessories. Elevate your style with custom-painted engine bay covers, sleek front splitters, and side skirts that scream sophistication. Keep your C8 protected with premium Radiator Grill screens. Stand out from the crowd at car shows and beyond. Use code CT10 for an exclusive 10% discount off your total purchase at radiatorgrillstore.com. Don't miss out on turning heads. Upgrade your Corvette today.
Hi, this is Kirk Benyon, and you're listening and watching Corvette Today with Steve Garrett.
Thanks once again for listening and watching Corvette Today, the show that talks about everything Corvette. Corvette Today is brought to you by Wheelcraft. Wheelcraft carries all the latest factory wheel designs for the C8 Stingray, Z06, and E-Ray, and popular wheel designs from previous generations. Along with bright chrome and black chrome, Wheelcraft now offers bronze and custom colors at half the cost of OEM. So visit wheelcraft.com today or just give them a call, 833-639-4231. I'm your host, Steve Garrett. With me is my buddy Tom Wallace, the 4th Chief Engineer for Corvette. And in this final segment, we're going to focus on his time with Corvette. Tom, one of your biggest milestones was the C6 ZR1. Tell me more about the Blue Devil.
Well, the Blue Devil, wow, what a program. Bob Lutz told me, okay, Dave Hill's going to retire pretty soon. You're going to take his place. I went over to Dave, and we were secretly meeting because it hadn't been announced yet, and trying to find out what's hot on the burner, et cetera, et cetera. And he was in the middle. The Z06 was just about to be introduced to the public, and the ZR1, backtrack. He took Rick Wagner, the CEO, for a ride in the Z06 at the Milford Prover Grounds before it went into production. Rick said, holy smoke, if you can do this for $65,000, what could you do for $100,000? Now, Rick didn't say, go do a ZR1. He just asked a question. And when you ask a Corvette chief engineer a question like that, we take it as direction to go do it. So Dave kicked off a little study to say, what could we do if we wanted to do a supercar at $100,000? That's when Dave and I talked, and he says, all right, we just kicked this off. You're picking up the ZR1 project. And Dave's comment was, don't mess it up.
Oh, great.
No way, Dave, because this is an attempt to try to get Corvette to be considered in supercar territory. Because, of course, in the U.S. we were, but over in Europe, we still were not considered a supercar, even with the Z06. So we took off on the project, and the first car was actually turbocharged. The engine guy, powertrain guys are awesome working with us, and they said, let's try turbocharging. But the problem was that the underhood heat, the C6 was not designed to get enough airflow underhood to cool the turbo. It was great for everything else, but it could not cool the turbos, and the car burned to the ground within the first couple of weeks of testing.
Ouch.
And it was like, uh-oh, so we can't do turbocharging. And oh, by the way, I forgot to mention why it's called the Blue Devil, because Rick Wagner went to Duke, and it was Duke Blue Devil. That was the code name for the project. So we quickly went back and said, all right, turbocharging is not going to work. The engine guys came up with a proposal to do supercharging because Eaton had brought out a new series of very efficient superchargers. So the engine guys packaged a supercharger on the top, said, let's try that. We started to do the development with a supercharged. We did not know if we could get 600 horsepower, but the engine guys said, we think we can. And they kept working. And we were tuning the car for about 600 horse. And we were so happy when they came up with 638 horsepower. Bottom line was the project obviously was finally approved. It was kept on the quiet for a long time. Little secret was we only had so much money, so we didn't have to go to the board of directors to get it approved. And we kept under that capital investment, and Bob Lutz was just a savior in helping us get whatever we needed. It came to fruition, and again, we had lots and lots of track time in that car before we ever introduced it to the public. It was just fantastic.
Yeah, it really was. I remember seeing that car for the first time at the Kansas City Auto Show. It's like, oh, this is the $100,000 Corvette, and you could see the supercharger through the window in the hood. That was a big deal.
Yes, of course it was. And if you looked through the wheels, you saw carbon ceramic brakes.
Right.
Which nobody had done in regular OEM production in the United States. They were a stable in the high-performance Porsches and Ferraris, and that was about it. And there was just all kind of technical advancements that we put into the car that you'd never believe we could do, inside General Motors, inside the United States.
That was awesome. And you were also there when Corvette switched over to Michelin tires. Now, the guys from Michelin have been on 2 or 3 times on Corvette Today, but tell me the backstory with Michelin.
Well, that's a great story. So we were well connected with Pratt & Miller, Gary Pratt, Jim Miller, Dan Binks, et cetera, because we were exchanging technology all the time. And good old Doug Feehan, and you know Doug very well.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm at one of the races, and the Corvettes were still on Goodyears at that IMSA race, and he pulled me to the side, and he said, hey, I need to talk to you about something. I said, what's that? He says, have you ever considered putting Michelin tires on the ZR1? And I said, well, as a matter of fact, we are struggling with the tire we have, the Goodyear tire, on the ZR1. And he says, well, little secret, we're switching to Michelin's in a race or two on the race car. Why are you doing that? So he described why. And I said, wow, that sounds like something that we could use. And so we contacted Michelin. Michelin jumped through hoops and said, absolutely, we'd be willing to try. So we actually had a bake-off between the Goodyear best tire and the Michelin best tire. Michelin won hands down. And I'm not being critical of Goodyear. They're a great tire. They were a great supplier. But they had fallen behind in the supercar tire technology, to be honest. And Michelin had not because of their racing in Europe. So we made the switch to Michelin's on the ZR1. Worked fantastic. There was a lot of internal pressure to say, you can't switch, you can't switch. It's a little bit like when we went to hidden headlamps. You can't do that, you can't do that, So we switched to Michelins. They worked so well that eventually we switched all the different models over to Michelin. And of course, they're on Michelins still today.
Yes, they are. And you being a race car driver, Tom, you were around for the introduction of Jake on Corvette Racing, too.
Yes, that was done. Gary Claudio, probably most people know that name. He was the one that helped spawn the Jake. It started at Le Mans. The discussion happened before Le Mans, but it started at Le Mans. They needed something to indicate take no prisoners, and that was the mantra, take no prisoners. The Jake was sketched up, and pretty soon it became part of Corvette Racing. And anywhere you'd go, you'd see the Jakes, and we had them on the race car, etc. But here's a story for you. We never had a Jake on a production car. So for the 2009 ZR1, we decided we were going to put Jake on the car somewhere. Well, there was a little bit of internal pressure from places in General Motors that said, you can't do that. It's a skull and crossbones. What are our customers going to think, et cetera, et cetera. So we didn't tell anybody, but we had a Jake cast into the airbox for the ZR1. There were only 4 people that knew: Harlan, Taz Jector, myself, and the airbox engineer. And we put it on the car, hit production, and it was wildly successful outside of GM. Now, inside GM, there were some people that weren't so happy, but that's what you do. You just go ahead and take the risk. And that was the first Jake on a OEM production car. And of course, there's Jakes on a lot of the production cars now.
Yeah, and that was a really cool deal, having Jake on the airbox there. He's a great mascot for Corvette Racing. Buddy, talk to me more about your relationship with Pratt & Miller and Corvette Racing team, because you saw the value of Corvette Racing for production cars.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. To be fair, Dave Hill had a relationship with Pratt & Miller, and, they would talk back and forth and try to exchange information. But when I come in, I said, I think I want to ramp that up some more. So within the first month, we had staff meetings at Pratt & Miller at their facility in Wixom at the race facility, probably once a quarter, to get to know people better. So our guys knew their guys and our gals knew their gals, et cetera, et cetera. And we really kept ramping up that relationship because Feehan and Gary Pratt knew they needed help from stuff in the production car to be able to be homologated in IMSA. And we knew that we needed their help as we were doing these supercars. And I'll tell you 2 quick stories. We had been developing even a greater relationship for about a year, and Dan Binks called one day and he says, Tom, Dan was the crew chief for both cars.
Dan Binks, he's been on Corvette Today.
Yes, super guy. So he called and he says, hey, Tom, I need some help. I said, what's that? And he says, well, we just got finished running Le Mans, which I knew because I was over there, and it was so hot that we had a lot of drivers had heat stroke. And the ACO is passing a new rule that says if you'll air condition your cockpit and keep it below, I think it was 85 degrees, we're going to allow you another 3 or 4 millimeters in your airbox. The idea was increase the airflow so you could increase the horsepower to offset the air conditioning drag in the name of safety for the drivers. And I said, man, that's a great idea. And he says, yeah, but we don't know anything about air conditioning over here at Pratt & Miller. And I said, I get it. So we went and we grabbed 2 of the air conditioning experts in General Motors and sent them over there for 2 weeks. And for the next race, there was an air conditioning system on the Corvette race cars because of that relationship. Now, it goes both ways. About maybe 2 or 3 months later, in doing the ZR1, we found that because we had added a couple extra coolers, we were generating more heat. We had the intercooler for the superchargers and the carbon ceramic brakes. We couldn't get enough airflow to all the different areas of the car that we needed, above about 150 miles an hour. The problem was inside GM, we have great wind tunnels, great test capabilities, et cetera. But we didn't do much above 100 miles an hour. So I called Binks and I said, damn, I got this problem with the ZR1. I can't cool. I can't get enough air to the carbon ceramic brakes. Can't get enough air to this. And every time we try, we generate front end lift and all that stuff. And he says, hey, send me all the data. He says, I'm going to put it into our engineers analysis. And they were able to do computer analysis rather than cut and test and cut and test and cut and test. So they did a whole computer analysis of airflow about where we needed what air, how we could do it, add these little airfoils. Example, tiny little airfoils on the bottom of the front lower control arm to get the airflow up to the brakes.
Huh.
Well, we'd have never thought of that. We didn't know, at that speed. Ended up, I don't think we'd have had the ZR1 without their help in all the airflow. That was just 2 examples, and there's thousands of examples today. Example, the C8 was done totally in conjunction. The guys at Pratt & Miller knew way before everybody else about the mid-engine C8 because there was quite a bit that was put into the production C8. Taj and his team did that to be able to homologate it into the race car.
That's cool. And speaking of Taj, you had a very, very special relationship with Taj. Talk about that in the Corvette team.
Well, I'll tell you, the Corvette team is the best team ever that I've ever worked with or worked on, and it really is a team. They never take no for an answer. We'll figure out a way, et cetera, et cetera. And after I had been there for a little period, maybe 6-7 months, I watched Taj and his capability, and he really was the one doing the car. Okay. I mean, he was the general of the car. And it was like, Taj, this is so awesome. We put a scheme in place where I actually was able to, we were able to make him Corvette Chief Engineer. And I became vehicle line executive and the chief engineer of European Corvette. We were able to get Taj into that position because of all the great work that he did and his team, et cetera, et cetera. So it was just a wonderful, wonderful relationship with him and Harlan. I have to tell a story about him and Harlan. They come up with such great ideas. And before we'd ever go into one of our staff planning meetings, they'd come in a day or two before, the two of them together, they'd close the door and they'd both have this twinkle in their eye. And I'd say, oh, now what? And it's like, well, things like, we've been thinking we want to do a Grand Sport. Yeah, what's that? We want to take the Z06 wider fenders, wider tires, wider stance, et cetera, but not put the Z06 engine in it. So it's for the people that want to look like a Z06, but they don't need all that horsepower. That sounds simple, but it's not.
Right.
And for the first hour, I'm saying, guys, we can't do that. We don't have the money. We don't have the people. And by the end of the hour, we were doing it. So we go into the planning meeting, and I'd say, well, what do we have on the agenda for new ideas? And of course, it was all set up, and boom, Taj and Harlan would jump up and talk about this, and off we'd go. I just can't say enough about Taj, and I mean, you look at what he did with his team for the rest of Corvette while he was there. Clearly, the great part was it was recognized. We got him into the Hall of Fame, boom, as soon as he was retired.
And you are a member of the Corvette Hall of Fame, inducted in 2018, which has to be a huge honor.
It is. Actually, I didn't know the guys were doing it. Next thing I know, I get a call from a couple of people say, hey, we need a little bit of information. And why? So I pass along the information. And the next thing you know, I got a call from Wendell Stroud, and he said, guess what? You're going to be inducted into the Hall of Fame. And what an honor it is. I mean, when you look at all the people in there in the Hall of Fame, it's just like, wow. I can't believe I'm in there, and I'm so honored to be in there. Just such a great honor.
You truly deserve it, my friend. Tom, thank you so much for taking the time to be on Corvette Today. It's been an honor and a pleasure having you on the show.
Well, thank you, Steve. It's been fun. And hey, we can do this again sometime too, really. It's just great. And the work you do is just fantastic. And the Corvette family loves you.
Thank you, buddy. We'll get you back on. We'll have some more Tom Wallace stories about Corvette. How's that sound?
Great. Thank you.
Thanks again for listening and watching Corvette Today. And be sure to tell your family, friends, and other Corvette enthusiasts about the Corvette Today show. And thanks to our sponsors, Wheelcraft. Want to dress up your Corvette with bright chrome or black chrome wheels? Visit wheelcraft.com to learn about their advanced PVD chrome finishing. They can refinish your wheels or offer a wheel exchange for most models, and it comes with a 5-year warranty. Visit wheelcraft.com today or call 833-639-4231. Soul Performance Products at soulpp.com, the official performance exhaust of Corvette Today. Sioka Corvette at CIOCCACorvette.com. E5 Wheels at E5Wheels.com. IntelliSense at IntelliSense.com. Also, Aerolarri Wheels. Get $100 off your purchase with the promo code CT111 at Aerolarri.com. Mark Falter with the Retirement Income Hour podcast. And Hendrick Chevrolet in Kansas City at ChevyUSA.com.
Thanks for checking out Corvette Today on podcast and YouTube. If you'd like to contact Steve with ideas for Corvette Today, you can email him at stevegarrettdj@gmail.com. Garrett has 2 R's and 2 T's. That's stevegarrettdj@gmail.com. Also, sign up for email notifications at corvettetoday.ck.page. Follow Steve and the show on social media on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Threads at Steve Garrett DJ. Thanks again for listening and watching Corvette Today.